Hi beautiful ladies, welcome back to my channel. So today I want to talk to you about how to navigate bullying and intimidation from other Black women. I've kind of touched upon this topic at different points in other videos, but I really kind of want to give you my personal story with this situation or with this experience and how I navigated this and how it ultimately led me to be the person that I am today, with hopes that it will inspire you and give you some encouragement along your journey. It's one thing to be bullied by other people who do not look like you. It's kind of expected that there's no allegiance and loyalty because you don't have anything in common. But it's another thing when the bullying comes from within and it comes from women who look like you, because there's this kind of unspoken, honestly, not even unspoken anymore. There's this sisterhood that we're often fed amongst women in general, but also specifically amongst Black women, where we're taught that, we have to look out for one another because it's rough out there and, there's no one who's going to look out for you like your own and, have each other's back and blah, blah, blah. And, we should have a united front against racism and oppression. But a lot of times the oppression comes from your own people. Yes, I've experienced pushback, if you will, from non-Black women of all races, but my number one stumbling block in life has been other Black women, especially when I was in my younger years, when I was in high school, all the way up to undergrad, when honestly I didn't really know better. I didn't know how to properly navigate life and how to deal with these things. And so I kind of was like a lamb amongst a pack of wolves because A, I had that ignorance. I really did not know how to deal with things. I was so young and naive. And number two, I simply just didn't have support from my family on how to navigate things. I was told that, whenever I would experience maybe bullying or exclusion or just typical mean girl energy from other Black women, I was told that I was too sensitive. I was told to kind of just let it go and, just continue to show up as your true authentic self, continue to be a good person, and that person will eventually see your worth. And I'm here to tell you that that person is not going to see your worth unless you have a legitimate reason to have issues with someone. You guys disagreed on something or whatever. Unless that has happened, when someone projects negative energy towards you, they're doing that because that's how they feel about you. And that mentality can change, but there's no telling when and if it'll change. And a lot of times, 9.5 times out of 10, when it does change, it's not authentic. They're doing it because they're changing their mentality because they have no other option. And they're looking to you to be kind of like a filler. So it's not legitimate and it's not authentic. My experiences with dealing with pushback from other Black women has been at school, at church, and at work. So firstly, at school, I remember one time when I was in grade 10 or 11, and there was this girl, we'll call her Big Lip, because her mouth just like hung open all the time. But I remember, I don't know what her problem was. There was like some other Black girls that didn't like me because I wasn't ghetto like them. They were kind of like the hood, ratchet, future baby mama type of girls, and I was like not like that. I was on the dance team. I did like contemporary dance and ballet and things like that in high school. I was an academic. I was on the honor roll. So like obviously we were not in the same crew, but that girl, like, we had a common friend, which was honestly my mistake. Even thinking that the common friend was different from those girls, but whatever. I remember one day I was getting my lunch and she kind of approached me randomly and was like, "Oh, I heard you were talking ish. If you want to fight, we can do it. We can hash it out right now." And I was just like, I was so baffled. I was like, "What? I don't even talk about you. Like, I don't even know you well enough to talk about you. So sorry. You're going to have to find someone else to be ghetto with because it's not going to be me. Like whatever pent up energy you have going on, I'm not going to be the one to absorb that and be a release for you. Sorry. And I walked away. But one of the pivotal moments was not even that for me. At the time, I was kind of going through a friendship breakup. It was just about to happen with these other two Black girls. And at one point, we used to be like really close friends. Like we used to call each other cousins, and like people thought that we were literally family because we were so close. And she was there with me during the situation. But as that girl approached me and threatened to cause physical harm to me, she walked away. And then when I went back inside to school, like to our lockers, and I spoke to her, and I'm just like, hey, like you kind of left me hanging. Her excuse was, oh, well, I knew she wasn't going to do anything. So I figured like there was no need to stick around. And it was honestly at that moment that I realized that number one, Black girls will attack you for no reason, just something as simple as being jealous. And our common friend actually confirmed it. She was there with me and she was like, yo, chill. She saw what was happening after and came and was like, yo, just leave her alone. And she walked away with me. And then when she spoke to her, I said, what was all of that about? Big Lip admitted and said, oh, nothing. I was just having a bad day and I wanted to fight someone. So I thought that she would be an easy target. And she's like, okay, that's pretty whack. But yeah, that just let me know that Black girls will want to fight you for no reason at all, simply just because you look threatening to them. If I wasn't a threat, she obviously was intimidated for the reasons that I mentioned earlier in the video. She kind of, I guess, would have found another candidate to try to pick on. And I know this is a common theme amongst other Black women and exoticals on the internet where like something as simple as having long hair, they will envy you and be like, ew, like why is her hair so long? I'm going to put gum in it. I remember there was a ghetto girl in one of my math classes that hated on this one Indian girl who had very, very long, beautiful hair. Like that girl's hair was like long down to her back, and you could tell it was genetics, but also you could tell that she took care of herself and she wore her hair proudly as she should. And she would just sit and like at the back of class with her adult baby hairs plastered to her forehead and her 2-inch ponytail, hating on the girl. And she would plot and say, one day I'm just going to put gum in her hair so that she'd be forced to cut her hair. And at the time, I thought that was whack, but I really did not understand the depth of that until I got older and understood life a little bit more. And I was like, wow, you're willing to cause, again, physical harm to someone just because you're jealous that your hair breaks off faster than it grows? That's pretty pathetic. So that was one cursor in the back of my mind where I was like, okay, I need to stay away from people like this because these Black girls are unhinged. I remember one time even I was taking the bus to go to school or to go home from school, and I was there with my friends, and this one ghetto girl from like this at-risk high school, they pretty much send like all the dumbasses to that school. Like all the bad kids went there. I don't care how it's, I'm going to be really blunt and frank in this video, so it may come across as catty. I don't care. If you don't like that type of energy, then you can move on. But I remember I was sitting waiting for the bus, and then my bus was approaching, and so were these ghetto girls. And this one girl was like, oh, I'm gonna mess you up. I'm gonna beat you up. And I'm just like, huh? Like I was genuinely so confused. And I remember my friend saying, yo, get up. Like it was these two brown girls that were like, get up. I see trouble and our bus is here. They'd be like, hey, Black Exotical, come on. Like our bus is here. Like they were looking out for my well-being. And I remember like this girl insisted that I was the girl that she was looking for. And the girl's friends were actually like, no, that's not the girl. Like they look similar, but like this girl's different. She's like, no, that's her. She just changed her hair. And they're like, no, I'm telling you, that's not the girl. And when I stood up and she saw my uniform, she was like, oh, my bad, you aren't the girl. But like she was still eyeballing me like she wanted to have a problem with me, even though her friends and she confirmed that I wasn't the girl that she had problem with. And I'm just like, okay, I need to get a car. At that age, I wasn't old enough to drive yet, but I'm like, as soon as I'm able to get my license, I'm gonna get my license and get a car so I don't have to deal with taking the bus with ratchets. When you live in the city, it doesn't matter how specialized your school is, you're gonna run into all types of people. So That's another reason why I tell Black identified women to leave metropolitan areas, or at the very least get like a car service or take an Uber so that you don't have to deal with ratchets, because this behavior even exists in adulthood. But even just as I left that environment and I went on to university, so I had an on-campus job. Um, and there were like a bunch of Black girls in that program as well. There was like a bunch of unambiguous Black girls and then like one ugly light-skinned Black girl who would pick on me. Like, I never had any interaction with these girls. I was very like introverted. I was like new to university, so at the time, like, I was in my first year trying to like navigate surviving a workload. Like, I had no idea what was going on, so I didn't have room for drama, much less to be petty to anyone. So there was really no reason for there to be personal beef. But yet still these girls found a way to have personal beef with me because I guess I was different. I'm an ambiguous looking Black girl, and because I look good. I remember there was one time in particular where I was with this one girl for like this event, and like we were leaving and she's like, "Those girls are laughing at you." And I'm just like, I didn't even notice because I was in my world, my own world. I remember like in our on-campus job, like one of the offices that we had like really huge windows, so you could see anytime someone walked by, you could see the person walking by. And so like, I guess like the first time I would walk by for the day, I'd wave at people and then keep it moving. But then like, because of where the office was situated and where I would go and study, I would constantly have to pass that office. So, I mean, logically, I'm not going to wave every time. Like, there's no need. And a coworker of mine was like, "Oh, this one like big back, fat, unambiguous Black woman that wasn't even a student. Like, she was like a paid staff of the university. She was talking about me apparently to the students and saying, "Oh, how come Black Exotical? She looks like she's so unhappy and she has such an attitude. She must be going through something." Simply because I did not wave to them every single time I passed the window. Oh, and I'm just like, you know what? That's what you get for taking a job with a bunch of Black chicks. I'm sorry to say. So it was from that point on that I was like, you know what? I'm going to get around other people. There really is no benefit in me trying to force this Black sisterhood because obviously it's not there, at least for me anyway. I even remember there was this like one, this was like at the cusp of the Black Lives Matter movement. So it was right after the incident happened with Trayvon Martin's. There was this one student union on campus that wanted to hold a conference. And because my on campus position kind of had, it dealt really closely with Black students on and off campus. So they wanted to align and like collaborate and do this event together. So I pretty much did all the work to get like community leaders to come in and give commentary on the events because a lot of the Black students felt affected by what happened. And so I coordinated and did all the legwork to get it done, get the poster done, get the questions written up that we're going to ask the panel and ask the audience and things like that. So the agreement was that we would take turns asking the questions essentially. And so every time it was my turn to ask a question, she would be like, "I'm going to ask the next one, okay?" And it's like she would do it in a way where she would say it in front of other people. So like if I started like acting up and saying, "Hey, like it's my turn. I like, why are you trying to take the spotlight?" I would look like the asshole. So she was very strategic like that. So ultimately that pissed me off because like she wanted to take all the credit and all the glory while I did all the legwork. And then later on in the year, she held a conference for like Black History Month. And I'm like, you know what? Based on how that girl moved, I'm not going to align myself with that situation. I'm going to just stay away from that altogether. I don't mess with that girl. She's toxic. She's whack. And I remember like for each of the student groups on campus, she allocated a certain number of tickets and then said, "If you do not sell all of these tickets, you need to come out of pocket and pay for the balance." And I was like, "No, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that at all. Like, I should not be responsible for your ticket sales if I am not collaborating and going to get equal benefits from this. So I backed out. And then like my group, we were like, I was labeled as like uncooperative and a sellout and not down with the struggle because I refused to come out financially to pay for these tickets for this conference. I mean, at the end of the day, like they found out like this girl was like they didn't sell any tickets, so they all, and she didn't tell people this at the beginning. They found out after when they're like, okay, how many tickets did you sell? Oh, you didn't sell it? Okay, you need to pay this. There was no written contract or anything like that. It was just a verbal contract. But because she was a part of the student union, she was able to withhold people's levy for money that they would get to run their events, essentially. So she abused her power essentially to manipulate people. So anyway, long story short, like this woman who was supposed to be all about Black liberation and removing Black oppression ended up being the oppressor herself towards Black people. And if you spoke up about it, you know, you were the problem, essentially. And this girl, she ended up being one of the founders of a Black Lives Matter chapter in one of the major cities in North America. She also was in the news for like just a bunch of salacious things that she said about white people. It just really solidified the fact that a lot of these SJW warriors are full of SHIT. They will tell you like, oh, we're oppressed and we need to stand up against the white man and racism and blah, blah, blah. But then we'll turn around and do what Bell Hooks said, do the work of the oppressor and oppress their people. Outside of school, I remember I was raised in the church. I was raised predominantly in the Black Jamaican church. So that was very traumatic in and of itself, just outside of having to deal with like Black women. But I had to deal with the intersection of religion, but also how toxic some Caribbean women can be towards other women. I find that in general, Caribbean women do not take care of themselves, which is why most Caribbean women are overweight. And like they'll cover it up and be like, oh, you know, I'm thick and sexy because like that's what their men tell them that they like. But like their men are also poor and broke and would go after a supermodel if they could, if they had the means to go after one. Anyway, if you are not thick, you automatically have a target on your back. And add on to that, you know, being beautiful, being well-spoken, not being a baby mom, etc. So I remember like going to church, and I remember one time like there was like a bunch of Black girls that were a part of the praise and worship team. I remember going like I was super early for service one day, and I went into the washroom to like touch up my makeup, and they were in there practicing, and I said, oh, good morning. Dead silent. I'm like, okay. And then I remember after I left, they started laughing, and I'm just like, I don't understand like what the problem is, because we've never had a conversation. It's not like you and I had beef and then now I'm awkwardly in there and now it's just weird. Like we've never had a sit down conversation. So I don't understand like why you felt the need to ignore me. But I understand why. Like 3 of the girls were unambiguous Black women. One was going through a mental breakdown and felt the need to like tell everybody at church about it during praise and worship. One had a face full of acne. Her skin looked messed up. Another was like demon possessed one time during service and ended up being a baby mom to some guy who left her. So of course you'd be jealous of the baddie. So having to deal with that lack of acceptance at church was a hard point for me. But then also like when I left that Caribbean environment and went to like a non-denominational church, I had the experience of dealing with this one big back chick that I spoke about in another video, where she had an issue with me because she was intimidated by me and jealous. And it was weird. And so my small group leader advised that I speak to the pastor's wife about it, who was an unambiguous Black woman. I spoke to her about the situation. She ignored it. And so ultimately I'm like, you know what, this is drawing like too much drama and I don't want to have to absorb that negative energy. So I left that church. But apparently that girl left that church as well because people we're talking about it and pretty much put two and two together, and we're saying, you're the reason why she left. Even though I never spoke about my situation to anyone, people just aren't dumb and they can put two and two together. Apparently, the pastor's wife called Big Back and said, hey, don't worry about it. Come back. We don't want you to leave. But never called me, even though I reached out to her and tried to lay a situation that quite frankly had nothing to do with me to rest, which told me that this pastor's wife had an issue with me clearly, even though we had no run-ins with each other, because of her own internalized issue. And she did have issues because every single time she took the mic during praise and worship, she felt the need to tell people that she only shops designer, that she only shops at department stores, even though she looked frumpy. Like, she wore the same pair of like washed out black jeans and like a black t-shirt to service. She had the same that like typical like low like haircut that black women wear, pixie cut, Sunday after Sunday, like no makeup, which is fine. You don't have to wear makeup if you don't want to, whatever. But like, she felt the need to pretty much tell everyone that she's that girl and that she only accepts expensive things, but she looked frumpy. And me now, I could put an outfit together. I look good, even though I was an undergrad student, with like no full-time job at the time because I was studying full-time. I remember one time my back was to her and like she came out of the office and I heard someone say, "Oh, those heels look amazing." Like, I think I was wearing like a pair of like Valentino like stud heels that I had gotten as a gift. And she's like, "Oh, those are nice." And when I turned around to say thank you and she saw my face, her face fell to the floor. That smile was wiped off her face so quick. And I'm just like, girl, you got bigger issues than me. Whatever. Going back to the Jamaican churches, I also struggled with acne from time to time. I would have moments where my skin would flare up because my hormones were not balanced. And there were like all the time, like these like Jamaican women would always call out my skin. They would always be like, "Wow, your face is full up of so much bumps. What are you gonna do about it?" And it's like, you claim to be like this Christian, which like Christianity is big on like being discreet and being respectful and mindful. But like, you're calling out my flaws in front of everyone for what? I remember this one time after church, like there was this one event and I sat down to have lunch before the event. So I was just sitting down eating food and this one stiff wig hat looking lady came over, unambiguous black woman, of course. And she like was like screwing up her face saying, "Oh, look at your face. Oh my God, what are you going to do about it?" And I looked at her and I'm like, I don't want to talk about my skin right now. And she did not like that. She was not happy that I put my foot down. I found some confidence and told her, no, like, you're not going to call me out in front of everyone and try to shame me. So she felt like I was being disrespectful to her because after that, she kind of was like all dismissive towards me. But that just let me know like how, and other experiences that I've experienced at church, how mean-spirited black women can be, even under the guise of religion, even though they adopt, or they're supposed to adopt, Christian principles that talk about love, being caring for other people, not offending other people by, calling out people's flaws. It just let me know that even with that, you could still deal with mean-spirited women. Outside of that, I remember after I graduated from undergrad, I had a job with a not-for-profit organization that pretty much worked with unions to help people from equity-seeking groups get jobs, like unionized jobs. Anyone who knows about unions know that they pay really well. They have excellent job security. You're pretty much set for life if you get a union job. So no one ever got hired because the executive director, unambiguous black woman, was confused, had no idea what she was doing, had no strategy, and was honestly just wasting money doing God knows what. But she would try to exclude myself from going to events. So the unions would often invite us to events. We were also sharing a space with the Business Improvement Association, and they had like this massive, the landlord that we were renting our space from had this huge Christmas party. And so I just showed up to work that day like I always did, I had no idea the event was even happening, so I didn't even dress up for the event. And I remember showing up there, and they're like, "Oh, are you coming to the Christmas party?" And I'm like, "No, I didn't even know it was happening." And they're like, "Oh, come on, we have extra tickets. Come with us." It was like non-black people. I'm like, "Okay, cool." So I went, had a great time. My supervisor showed up, and she did not look happy. She's like, "Oh, what are you doing here?" And I'm like, "They invited me to the event." And she's like, "Interesting," and walked away. Another time that a union, like they were desperately trying to get rid of their tickets for their event because they didn't want like their food and their money to go to waste. So they asked myself and another black person on the team, like, "Hey, do you want to come?" And she's like, "Oh, no, 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 no. I'll take care of that. No, 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 no. No, no, no. It's just for us." Like trying to block us out, even though we worked really hard with like no guidance, no lack of leadership. We worked really hard to make things happen for the organization. And she thought that we were not good enough to be able to partake in the fruits of our labor, even though she claimed she was in a position where she would work to remove boundaries for people of color. She would do the same thing to us by excluding us because she wanted to maintain this hierarchy of I'm like an executive director and you're just an analyst. So all of these situations and just other situations, this made me feel like I wasn't enough because my identity was constantly being challenged in Black spaces. And sometimes I would overcompensate by trying to look and act like a typical Black person. I would dumb myself down. I would kind of just not try as hard in school so that I could try to look like one of them. But I still would never fit in because I looked different. I was fundamentally different. It also led to me people pleasing and being bound to people's opinions because I wanted so desperately to show that I wasn't a threat so that I could be accepted. And then through that, that also led to depression because I didn't know how else to show up because I wasn't taught and exposed to like other ways of thinking, if you will, outside of the Black church, essentially, in the Black community. And then being different was frowned upon. So even if I wanted to explore the interests that I had, outside of what I was familiar with, I had to suppress that. And honestly, this is one of the main drawbacks of being sheltered. You don't have access to information on other ways of life or thinking. And then it also leads to a limited mindset when you're introduced to other ways of life because it's like you have this cognitive dissonance that challenges your reality. It challenges what you've known for decades. And so unless you're naturally the type of person who's open to learning new things and you're open-minded, you'll have a really, really hard time adjusting to new things. And I was kind of like that for a good while. But at some point I reached my breaking point and was like, you know what? I want better for myself. So I chose to accept that I was different. And I leaned into it. I started exploring the parts of myself that I suppressed, like embracing other cultures. I got along really well with other cultures. I leaned into that. I leaned into my golf, my desire and passion for golf, dance. I had kind of stopped that after I left high school. I picked it up again, traveling, continuing to practice French and Spanish, having an interest for other languages like Mandarin and Cantonese, embracing the fact that I like foreign cuisine. I also leaned into building my career. Like there were a lot of women in the spaces that I was in that didn't prioritize career because they were so entrenched in poverty. I didn't come from an impoverished family, but like I guess because we were in like these Black circles, it was a melting pot of like predominantly low income families, but then like people who were doing all right. And I said, no, like I don't want to only do all right. And I most definitely don't want to be low income. I want to be that girl. I want to live a prosperous, affluent life. And so I leaned into my career and building that, but also focusing on my outward appearance. Focusing on my outward appearance was something that was frowned upon, coming from a Christian background. And I said, no, I look good and I'm not going to waste my life covering that up. And so I focused on maintaining a healthy lifestyle so I can stay skinny. I focused on balancing my hormones so I could have better periods and clear skin. And that would just naturally attract quality connections. And then life became more peaceful because there was no drama. I no longer felt the need to people please. and I embraced boundaries. So I avoided toxic spaces like church, honestly, and people, and I kept a private life. I also adopted a growth mindset, which I've spoken about before, but pretty much looking at life from the lens of thinking that you can overcome anything, that even if you experience roadblocks and challenges, those are simply just opportunities for you to either learn something from that situation or an opportunity for you to overcome that and come out better on the other side. And I also accepted that there are multiple viewpoints in life and that they're also acceptable, even if I myself don't align with those viewpoints or I don't end up embracing it, that's totally fine. Two can be good and right and meaningful at the same time. And once I started to do that, that opened me up to learning from various sources, which then changed my life because I was able to apply and glean from different sources and not just relying on one source to fuel me, essentially. So if you're listening in a nutshell and you've had similar experiences, I suggest that you keep an open mind and be open to different viewpoints, even if they don't align with yours. You can learn anything from anyone. Like, for example, I learned beauty secrets from like Instagram baddies and like S workers. I'll never be an S worker. I don't align with that type of lifestyle, but I acknowledge that these women have mastered the art of feminine seduction, which can be used to your advantage, essentially. Be open to trying new things. That is also a part of learning, so that you'll learn new skills, new hobbies, new interests. That gives you a more zest in life. That gives you something to look forward to in life. But it also makes you more appealing to other people because you have this polarity that gives you a mysterious edge, if you will. They're always learning something new about you because you have so many different layers. And the most obvious one, stay away from toxic environments. You don't owe anyone loyalty, especially as it relates to like race loyalty, if their beliefs and practices don't align with yours, and especially if they're harmful. And I've spoken about it many times in the Black community. The Black community has a lot of work to do, not just in terms of like the overt safety of Black identified women, but also just with the limited mindset and the scarcity mindset that a lot of Black people have across multiple socioeconomic statuses. It really does not serve you. And if you are an individual who has the pleasure of being born and raised, or you migrated to a first world country like the United States, Canada, the UK, you really will do yourself a disservice and you are really wasting a good resource if you continue to hold on to regressive and limited mindsets that exist in the Black community. If you want to succeed and do well in life, you need to learn how to assimilate to the broader culture that you're in. You need to learn how to open up your mind to new ways of thinking and new viewpoints so that, number one, you can look like one of them, you can align. A lot of the mentalities that exist in the Black community are born from survival, and constantly being in survival mode will have you in fight or flight stage instead of having you in a stage where you're cultivating and growing and healing and thriving, essentially. And lastly, don't change who you are to fit in. There really isn't a monolith. Like, I hear Black people say all the time, like, oh, white people like to lump us all together in one group and we're not the same. But then we'll turn around and do the same thing to Black people who don't align with struggle. Okay, if you are the type of Black person who has a Black woman who has a growth mentality, you kind of are happy-go-lucky, you have a glass half full type of mentality, don't try to change who you are to make it seem like you're down with the struggle. It's a good thing if you're not down with the struggle, okay? That means that you're on the path to success and you're on the path to abundance, and you need to continue to tap into that. So go where you're appreciated. That usually means aligning with people who have similar likes and interests to you. It may be uncomfortable at first, exploring new avenues. You may get pushback from racist people and people who they themselves have a limited mindset because they haven't been opened up to other viewpoints in life, but that's their problem, not yours. There are many people who are open to meaningful relationships and connections with people from all walks of life because they see the beauty and the value in that. And so you stand to benefit from that as well as a Black exotical. So let me know what you think about this topic. Have you experienced anything similar to this? If you have, how have you navigated it? If you have not, how have you avoided dealing with things like this? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.